July 10, 1944. Normandy, France. The morning sun pierces a thick mist over the bocage. Hedges, gnarled and dense, stretch along the dirt roads like barricades, hiding movement, masking intent. The air is thick with smoke from scattered craters, and the tang of burning fuel and scorched metal lingers. Somewhere to the east, artillery booms, muffled yet unmistakable, shaking the ground beneath your boots. A Sherman tank sits awkwardly in a crater, its turret twisted at an unnatural angle. Its tracks are shredded, and a jagged hole smokes faintly along its flank. A crew of 4, gaunt, dirt-streaked, and still shaken, is climbing out cautiously. They glance around, wary of German snipers perched unseen among the hedgerows. "We'll get her back," mutters Sergeant James Larkin of the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, crouching behind a fallen branch and surveying the wreckage. His voice is calm, methodical, but the lines around his eyes betray weeks of sleepless nights. "Somehow we always do. The Germans, entrenched just a few hundred meters away, have witnessed this before. They fire, they destroy, they hope the damage is final. Yet over the past month, they have begun to whisper among themselves, how could these walking giants vanish into the mists and return days later, repaired and ready to fight again?" From field to depot, from salvage yard to active combat, the Allies had engineered an assembly line of resilience. Sherman tanks, vulnerable yet versatile, were no longer mere vehicles. They were puzzles of survival. On the battlefields of Normandy, every dent, every gash in steel was meticulously catalogued. Recovery teams would arrive, sometimes under fire, to tow the injured beasts back to forward repair stations. And from there, the magic began. Crews of engineers, mechanics, and welders would strip them, replace hull sections, swap turrets, patch tracks, and bring them roaring back to life. The Royal Army Ordnance Corps depot at Bayeux hummed like a living organism. Sheets of steel glinted in the early morning sun, cranes groaning as they lifted battered turrets. Diesel engines coughed in the yard, a metallic orchestra of repair and reclamation. Men in overalls and grease-streaked faces moved with precision, almost choreographed, as if every motion had been rehearsed countless times. Corporal Henry Dawkins, a young mechanic no older than 21, ran his hands over the jagged edge of a Sherman's hull. "Looks beyond hope," he muttered. The senior foreman, a grizzled veteran named Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Penrose, crouched beside him, eyes scanning the damage. "Nothing's beyond hope," Penrose said flatly. "Not when you've got prefabricated plates waiting and a TIG welder and you'll be surprised what a tank can take and still live to fight another day." The secret, as Dawkins would soon learn, was preparation. Each depot had a stockpile of prefabricated parts turrets. Road wheels, tracks, engines, even entire hull sections ready to replace destroyed components. Damage was assessed within hours of recovery. Minor dents and scrapes were welded. Catastrophic holes were cut away and replaced with factory-fitted sections. The Sherman, simple yet robust, was ideal for this kind of rapid refurbishment. Its modular design meant that a destroyed tank could be rebuilt in a fraction of the time it would take to build a new one from scratch. The process was relentless. Crews worked in shifts, sweating under the summer sun, inhaling clouds of smoke and metal dust. Sparks from welding arcs illuminated soot-streaked faces in the dim interior of repair sheds. Every bolt, every nut was counted and recorded. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was an air of calm competence. These men knew the cost of failure. A tank left unrepaired meant fewer armored support units at the front, and potentially lives lost. Outside, the sounds of battle never ceased. Somewhere beyond the hedgerows, a distant explosion rattled windows and sent pigeons scattering from their perches. The men at the depot worked as though in a protective bubble, a sanctuary where destruction could be reversed. For soldiers in the field, this meant something profound: hope. Every repaired Sherman rolling back onto a Normandy road was a reminder that the Allies refused to be diminished, no matter how severe the blow. German reconnaissance, however, struggled to understand this phenomenon. Captain Klaus Richter of the 12th SS Panzer Division, reporting from a hedgerow near Cannes, scribbled furiously in his log. "Tanks destroyed yesterday found operational today," he wrote. "The enemy possesses a remarkable facility for repair. Beyond comprehension. Their vehicles vanish after battle, only to return fully functional. Morale among our troops is affected." The Germans had witnessed it themselves. Field artillery crews, confident that a single well-placed shell would end a Sherman's life, began to notice the unnerving pattern. The next day, or within 3-4 days, the tank was back. Turrets spinning, machine guns rattling. Entire platoons reported the same. The Allies did not treat their casualties as permanent losses. The rapid turnaround created a kind of psychological warfare, feeding fear and uncertainty into German ranks. Back at Bayeux, Dawkins wiped sweat from his brow and examined the turret that had once been pockmarked with shrapnel. "How fast do you think we can get her back?" he asked. Penrose glanced at the clock, then at the stack of replacement parts. "By tomorrow, if luck holds," he said. And he meant it. By tomorrow, the Sherman would roar again, a ghost returned from the dead. Repair teams sometimes even improvised in the field. Forward repair units, known as light maintenance units, followed the front lines equipped with welders, spare parts, and mobile cranes. They patched hulls and replaced damaged tracks under the threat of sniper fire, artillery bursts, and the constant tension of an unseen enemy in the hedgerows. Men who had been combat engineers were suddenly mechanics. Mechanics became salvagers. Salvagers became welders. The battlefield became a laboratory of ingenuity, improvisation, and determination. By the afternoon, a freshly repaired Sherman rumbled down a dirt road, dirt kicking up behind its tracks. Its crew, exhausted but eager, waved to the depot men who had labored for hours. They had seen death, destruction, and the sudden absence of their metal companion. Now, miraculously, it lived again, ready to fight, to push forward, to defy the expectations of anyone who had hoped it would be gone for good. And somewhere, across the same roads, German officers noted the same unnerving truth. The Allies' tanks were resilient, almost immortal. A single kill could never reduce their numbers permanently. The realization began to settle in a silent, creeping dread. Here was an enemy whose mechanical lifeblood could be restored faster than bullets and shells could destroy it. By late afternoon, the battlefield resembled a broken chessboard. Craters lined the fields, and the smell of cordite hung in the air like a stubborn fog. Alongside the battered Shermans, bulldozers pushed wreckage aside, forming lanes for the recovery trucks. The rumble of engines, the metallic clang of chains and tow cables, and the occasional hiss of steam from overworked boilers filled the sounds of war. Lieutenant William "Bill" Harper, of the 4th Armored Division, leaned against the hood of his recovery truck, scanning the horizon. His voice was low, clipped by habit. "Another one down in the hedgerow," he said, pointing toward a Sherman that had been pierced by an 88mm shell. Its turret lay askew, and smoke rose from the mangled engine. Harper had done this before many times. The men he led knew the drill. Attach tow cables, secure the vehicle, guide it to the extraction lane. Time was everything. The longer a tank sat disabled, the greater the risk of capture, scavenging by the enemy, or complete loss. Recovery teams like Harper's worked in constant tension, aware that German snipers or artillery observers could appear at any moment. One misstep could cost a life or worse, the tank itself. Yet the crews moved with practiced efficiency, almost like clockwork. Drivers eased their trucks close to the wrecks, chains rattling against twisted steel. Mechanics clambered over shattered armor, assessing which sections could survive the journey, which needed immediate replacement, and which would have to wait until reaching the depot. It was here, in these frontline salvage operations, that ingenuity became survival. If a track was blown apart, field crews used improvised braces to hold it in place for towing. If the turret's rotation was jammed, they devised temporary solutions with steel bars and hammers. Forward welders carried portable kits, fixing minor breaches in armor before the tank even moved an inch. Every successful extraction was a triumph of coordination, skill, and nerves of steel. The Germans watched, bewildered. Reports reached Captain Hans Weber of the 21st Panzer Division. He had spent weeks trying to halt the Allied advance through the bocage, firing artillery rounds at tanks that seemed unstoppable. "Destroyed units reappear," he wrote. "The enemy has a strange resilience. It is disheartening. Their recovery operations are swift, methodical, and almost magical to the eye." These accounts were not exaggerations. A tank felled on Monday could be rolling back into battle by Thursday. The Allies' system was a combination of meticulous planning and improvisation under fire. Prefabricated armor sections were stockpiled near the front, enabling quick swaps. Engines, transmissions, even turrets could be removed and replaced in record time. Depot personnel kept detailed logs, marking the serial numbers of damaged vehicles, recording every repair made, and tracking the distribution back to the front. Back in the extraction lane, Sergeant Larkin directed a team towing a Sherman with a smashed frontal armor plate. "Steady, watch that wire, easy now." His voice was calm but urgent. Sweat ran down his temple, streaking the grime from days of continuous operations. The tank shuddered under the strain, its wounded body groaning with every jolt. Larkin's hands tightened on the chains. One more slip, and the tank could flip, or worse, snap the cables and injure a man. Minutes felt like hours, but soon, the Sherman was cleared from the front line. It rolled onto a flatbed truck and was driven toward the temporary repair facility, a collection of sheds, tents, and makeshift workshops hidden from the German view. There, a team of specialists awaited: welders, engine mechanics, armor fitters, and electricians. Each had a role, each a schedule. Like surgeons in a field hospital, they knew the precise sequence of steps to bring a tank back to life. The process was surprisingly fast. Within hours, damaged turrets were lifted and replaced with spares. Tracks were repaired, motors rebuilt, and armor patched using pre-cut plates and quick welding techniques. By evening, the Sherman, once a broken husk, would be driving under its own power again, crew ready to return to the fray. For the soldiers at the front, the psychological impact was profound. Seeing a comrade's tank return, seemingly resurrected, boosted morale. It reinforced the belief that no setback was permanent, that the machinery of war could be repaired as swiftly as a human wound. Conversely, German troops, who had counted on the destruction of these armored beasts, found themselves demoralized. Every shell that failed to permanently kill a Sherman became a reminder that Allied logistics and engineering had created a form of battlefield immortality. And yet, amidst this rapid cycle of destruction and renewal, human cost remained ever present. Recovery crews, mechanics, and drivers faced constant danger. Each day, some paid with their lives, caught in the crossfire while performing their vital work. Their skill and bravery, largely invisible to the enemy, formed the backbone of the Allied advance through Normandy. Night fell over Normandy with little ceremony. The hedgerows cast long, twisting shadows over the fields, and the smell of wet earth mixed with oil and smoke. Inside the repair sheds at the forward depots, lamps flickered, casting uneven light over rows of Sherman tanks in various states of disassembly. Sparks flew from welders' torches, illuminating the faces of men bent over engines and hulls, focused to the point of obsession. Lieutenant Colonel Penrose walked among them, clipboard in hand. He paused by a Sherman whose turret had been lifted and set aside. "How long till she's back?" he asked. The mechanic, a stocky sergeant named Frank O'Connell, wiped sweat from his brow. "If everything goes right by first light. We've got the new hull plates, the tracks are ready, and the engine is stripped for inspection." Penrose nodded, satisfied. "Good, every tank counts." The process of rapid repair was almost surgical. Forward depots had perfected techniques that blurred the line between fieldwork and factory precision. Prefabricated armor plates were cut to exact specifications. Entire suspension units could be swapped without dismantling the rest of the chassis. Engines were rebuilt in modular sections, allowing mechanics to replace only what was damaged rather than stripping the whole power plant. Electricians rewired communication systems using standardized kits. Every movement was timed, documented, and rehearsed. Welders worked in pairs, one holding the torch steady while the other guided the steel plate into place. Sparks showered onto oil-stained overalls, illuminating the determination etched on each man's face. The hum of grinders, the clanging of hammers, and the hiss of acetylene torches created a symphony of controlled chaos. This was not improvisation, it was a carefully orchestrated machine of repair. Outside, the sounds of distant artillery were constant reminders of why speed mattered. Every minute a tank sat idle was a minute the infantry lacked armored support. Yet within the depot, there was a quiet focus, a sense of purpose that surpassed fear. Each man knew that their labor directly influenced the front line. A repaired Sherman meant another advance, another foothold in Normandy, another chance to push the German defenses further. On the field, German soldiers struggled to comprehend this efficiency. Major Ernst Vogel of the 2nd Panzer Regiment reported after a reconnaissance patrol, "We destroyed at least 3 tanks in the hedge lines yesterday. Today, I counted 5 operational units where none should exist. Their repair methods are beyond our knowledge. The men are resourceful, and their vehicles return as though alive." This phenomenon, repeated across Normandy, had a strategic effect. The Germans assumed destruction equaled permanent loss. Their artillery officers calculated kills. Their tactical plans relied on the attrition of Allied armor. Instead, each destroyed Sherman returned to fight, sometimes even strengthened by reinforced armor or upgraded components. The psychological weight was immense. Artillery crews fired on targets they knew might rise again, and infantry faced tanks that had already survived hell and come back for more. By midnight, a line of freshly repaired Shermans rolled out of the depot, engines growling softly in the dark. Their crews, relieved and tired, mounted the vehicles and checked weapon systems. The tanks were not perfect. They bore scars of battle, but they were functional, reliable, and ready for the front. For the men of the Royal Army Ordnance Corps and their American counterparts, each successful turnaround was a quiet victory, unseen by the enemy yet pivotal in the overall campaign. Meanwhile, in the German ranks, confusion and frustration deepened. Reports of miraculous tank returns spread from platoon to company to battalion. Officers debated whether to believe their own eyes, and morale wavered. The Germans could destroy a Sherman today, but tomorrow it might be back, undiminished and resolute. For the Allies, this was a strategic advantage as much as a mechanical one. Rapid repair had become a weapon in its own right, undermining German confidence while sustaining the momentum of the offensive. By the first light of dawn, Normandy's fields were again alive with the sound of armored movement. Sherman tanks, once broken and abandoned, rolled steadily along dirt roads, dust rising behind them. Infantry soldiers watched with renewed hope. Engineers and mechanics, sweat-soaked and exhausted, slumped briefly against their workbenches before preparing for the next round of destruction and repair. The cycle would repeat day after day, each iteration proving that machinery, ingenuity, and determination could defy even the most devastating blows. By mid-morning, the Normandy countryside seemed deceptively calm. Mist hovered over the fields, curling around the broken hedgerows, masking the scars of yesterday's battles. From a distance, a column of Sherman tanks rumbled along a dirt track, their engines low and steady, dust plumes trailing behind them. To the untrained eye, these were ordinary machines, but to German observers, they had become ghosts, survivors of artillery and anti-tank fire returning from the dead. Captain Klaus Richter of the 12th SS Panzer Division crouched in the shade of a crumbling stone wall. He scribbled in his notebook, frustration evident in the tight lines of his face. They destroy them, we see them in ruins. By the next day, they march again. I have no explanation. No answer that makes sense. Their engineers are witches, their tanks spirits of steel. The reality was less mystical but no less impressive. Sherman recovery and repair had become an art form. Mechanic teams moved with purpose, almost ritualistic. Forward units would tag a damaged tank with chalk symbols indicating the severity of damage. H meant hull compromised, T turret damage, S for suspension. Within hours, trucks arrived to tow the vehicle back to the nearest depot, where workmen in blue overalls and grease-streaked faces took over. Inside the repair sheds, the air was thick with metal and oil. Sparks from welding arcs illuminated grimy faces, hands moving with precision honed by months of repetition. Prefabricated armor plates lay stacked along walls. Engines stood ready for swap-outs, and road wheels were sorted by size and type. Time was precious. The Germans believed destruction was permanent. Every hour a tank sat idle gave the Allies an edge. But every hour, a Sherman was repaired and returned to erase that advantage. Lieutenant William Harper oversaw one such operation. A Sherman with its turret blown clean off had arrived by flatbed that morning. "We'll get her spinning by dusk," he said to his crew, eyes scanning the chaos of parts, tools, and half-assembled machines. Sparks flew as men welded new plates onto the hull. Engineers replaced road wheels and tracks, and the engine was coaxed back to life with a mix of skill and brute determination. Meanwhile, on the front lines, soldiers noticed a strange pattern. Yesterday's burned-out Sherman lay in a field crater. Today, it patrolled the same road, cannon rotating, machine guns rattling. Infantry whispered about tanks that refused to die, a resilience that bolstered their courage and unnerved the enemy. "Look! There she is again," said Private Thomas Grady of the 1st Infantry Division, pointing at a familiar hull climbing over a rubble-strewn road. "I saw her take a shell yesterday. Now she's leading the advance." The Germans took note. Captain Hans Weber's reports grew increasingly tense. "Our artillery calculations fail. Vehicles assumed destroyed are back in action, sometimes improved, often fully functional. Morale is impacted. Soldiers question the permanence of our successes. The enemy has turned logistics into a weapon." Back at the depots, the men understood the weight of their task. Each repair was more than mechanical, it was symbolic. Every rebuilt Sherman represented a defiance of fate, a statement that the Allies would not be stopped, not by shells, not by mines, not by anything the Germans could throw at them. The engineers' hands were steady because the stakes were clear. The tanks they repaired carried not only men but hope, firepower, and the future of the campaign. By evening, the repaired Shermans were back on the move. Crews climbed aboard, checking instruments, weapons, and tracks. Engines roared to life, echoing across the fields and sending birds fluttering into the darkening sky. The tanks moved as if animated by determination, scars visible but irrelevant to their mission. For the men in the field, it was a morale boost like no other. For the Germans, it was a growing dread. Every destroyed tank was a temporary victory. Every repaired Sherman was a reminder of Allied ingenuity and relentless persistence. As night fell, the forward depots lit up with lanterns and welding sparks, a surreal glow against the backdrop of dark hedgerows. The cycle of destruction and resurrection would continue, relentless and unforgiving. Across Normandy, soldiers on both sides understood a new reality. In this theater, the battle was not only fought in the fields but also in the workshops, sheds and depots where steel was restored and Sherman tanks returned to life with astonishing speed. By August 1944, the Allied push through Normandy had become a testament to endurance and logistics as much as firepower. German officers, long confident in their superior tactics and artillery, began recording a disturbing pattern. Every time they destroyed a Sherman, the relief was fleeting. Within days, the same tank or one rebuilt from its remains was back on the front line. Major Ernst Vogel of the 2nd Panzer Regiment noted in his field diary, "We calculate losses as permanent. Yet for every vehicle we destroy, another or the same returns." Their ability to repair and return machines is unprecedented. The Allies had turned the art of repair into a strategic weapon. It was not simply the speed that mattered, it was the psychological impact. German crews hesitated before firing, questioning whether their shots would have any lasting effect. Artillery officers recalculated trajectories, doubting the outcome of each shell. Infantry facing returning Shermans learned that a destroyed tank was only temporarily absent. For every loss inflicted, the Allies had a system to recover, rebuild, and redeploy. At the Royal Army Ordnance Corps' forward depot near Bayeux, the day's operations were already in motion. Lieutenant Colonel Penrose oversaw 2 newly arrived Shermans, both victims of heavy artillery. One had a turret blown apart. The other's tracks were shredded. Engineers and mechanics moved with efficiency born from months of repetition. A turret was lifted into place with a crane. Tracks were replaced, suspension adjusted. Sparks flew from welders' torches in a precise, almost choreographed pattern. Corporal Henry Dawkins, hands black with grease, wiped sweat from his brow. "She be ready to roll by morning," he said, nodding to the foreman. Penrose glanced at the clock and allowed a small nod of approval. "Good. Every tank counts. Never forget, boys, the enemy doesn't know we re-fighting them as much in the sheds as on the fields." The recovery and repair system was rigorous. Prefabricated parts allowed for rapid replacement. Standardized procedures ensured efficiency. Engine swaps could be completed in hours, armor plates replaced seamlessly, and road wheels aligned with meticulous care. Each repaired Sherman bore visible scars, but remained fully operational. By design, the system emphasized speed without sacrificing reliability, an engineering miracle under wartime pressure. Meanwhile, German reconnaissance noted the unnerving consistency. Captain Hans Weber's patrols recorded destroyed Shermans vanishing from fields only to reappear within days. Reports filtered up the chain of command. At divisional headquarters, officers debated the implications. Could the Allies truly outlast them, not only in manpower but in machinery? Could a single shell ever be decisive if these tanks returned stronger and faster than anticipated? This resilience shifted the psychological landscape of the campaign. Allied infantry, knowing that support would not be permanently lost, advanced with renewed confidence. German soldiers, conversely, faced mounting anxiety. The unpredictable return of Shermans disrupted defensive plans and injected doubt into otherwise routine operations. Each repaired tank was a silent assertion of industrial and logistical supremacy, a quiet but potent weapon in its own right. By nightfall, freshly repaired Shermans rumbled from the depot, engines growling, cannons ready. Crews climbed aboard, fatigue visible but determination intact. The tanks moved toward the hedgerows, dust kicking up behind their tracks. They were no longer just machines. They were symbols of persistence and ingenuity, of the Allies' ability to endure and adapt in ways the Germans had not anticipated. Across Normandy, the Germans came to a reluctant understanding. The battle was no longer solely fought with shells and bullets, but also with steel, sweat, and the relentless machinery of repair. Every destroyed Sherman was temporary. Every repaired Sherman was proof that the Allies had mastered a new form of war, a war in which destruction was never final. And every victory could be reversed almost overnight. By late August, the psychological effect of rapid tank repair was as crucial as the mechanical feat itself. German infantry and artillery units, who had grown accustomed to calculating losses and expecting permanent results, found themselves in an unfamiliar state: uncertainty. Each Sherman knocked out today might rise again tomorrow, ready to engage, ready to push forward, ready to threaten. Captain Klaus Richter of the 12th SS Panzer Division scribbled in his log after a morning patrol. The enemy's tanks are returned to us almost as if by magic. Our men hesitate to commit, fearing that what we destroy will only come back stronger. Morale suffers, discipline wavers, and confidence erodes. We have underestimated the power of their logistical network. The Allies were aware of this effect. Forward officers encouraged their soldiers to watch the depot's operations, to witness firsthand the resurrection of their armored beasts. It reinforced the belief that no setback was permanent. Lieutenant William Harper oversaw a convoy of repaired Shermans as they merged with infantry units. Soldiers saluted the returning tanks, some joking quietly, others shaking their heads in awe. Each repaired vehicle was a morale boost. Each reinforced crew a testament to human and mechanical endurance. Even field commanders remarked on the effect. Brigadier John Whitmore of the 30th Armored Brigade noted in his dispatch, "Our tanks, once destroyed, are returned to service with remarkable speed. This capability sustains morale in the field and keeps our momentum. Enemy hesitation is palpable. They do not expect our machines to return so swiftly. The Germans try to adapt." Artillery officers recalculated, engineers reinforced hedgerows, and anti-tank teams prepared multiple coordinated strikes. Yet the Allies' rapid repair cycle rendered many of these efforts moot. Tanks that had been destroyed and removed from the line were repaired faster than the Germans could anticipate, often returning with reinforced armor or upgraded weaponry. For every shell fired in hope, the enemy faced the looming certainty of a returning adversary. Back at the depots, the work never ceased. Sparks illuminated night skies, mechanical hammers echoed across the yard, and cranes lifted turrets with almost ritual precision. Each repaired Sherman became a quiet statement. The Allies refused to be permanently diminished, refusing to accept losses as absolute. It was a testament not only to engineering but to perseverance, ingenuity, and discipline. German reconnaissance noted the phenomenon across Normandy. Lieutenant Karl Meinhardt of the 9th Panzer Division wrote in his report, "For every tank we destroy, another of the same appears on the front line within days. The enemy's capacity to restore machines is beyond our calculations. This unpredictability affects morale and hampers operations." By September, this cycle had become a hallmark of the Normandy campaign. Sherman tanks destroyed one week could be operational the next, their crews remounted and their weapons calibrated. Infantry units advanced with renewed confidence, knowing that armored support would be available despite setbacks. Engineers, mechanics, and recovery crews had become as essential to the Allied advance as the soldiers themselves. And yet the human toll was undeniable. Recovery crews faced constant danger, often under artillery fire or sniper attack. Injuries and deaths occurred regularly, hidden casualties behind the visible successes. Each repair was a triumph of labor, skill, and bravery unseen by the enemy, but pivotal in sustaining the offensive through Normandy's difficult terrain. By dawn, the repaired Shermans rumbled once again through the hedgerows. Dust rose behind them like smoke signals, announcing the return of machines once considered lost. To the Germans, it was a haunting sight, armored ghosts returning, engines growling, cannons ready, defying destruction and reshaping expectations. To the Allies, it was a reaffirmation of industrial ingenuity, discipline, an unyielding determination, an invisible weapon that changed the battlefield as profoundly as any gun or shell. By mid-September 1944, the Allied advance in Normandy had gained momentum that seemed unstoppable. The combination of infantry, artillery, air support, and critically, the relentless recovery of armored units was straining German defenses to the breaking point. Sherman tanks, once viewed as easily neutralizable, had become symbols of inevitability. Destroyed one day, repaired the next, and back in the fight as if impervious to attrition. In the hedgerows near Caen, German officers whispered about the resurrected machines. Major Ernst Vogel wrote, "Every engagement demonstrates the enemy's resilience. Our calculations for tank losses are rendered meaningless by their recovery operations. Morale among our men is deteriorating. Confidence in our ability to slow them wanes." At the forward depots, the rhythm of repair continued with mechanical precision. Lieutenant Colonel Penrose inspected a Sherman whose engine block had been shattered by artillery. The turret had been replaced, tracks restored, and the electrical system rewired with near-factory precision. Penrose tapped the side of the hull, a faint echo resonating through the steel. "She run," he murmured, as mechanics prepped the vehicle for redeployment. This was not merely logistics, it was warfare by persistence. Every repaired tank allowed Allied commanders to maintain pressure, exploit breaches, and sustain momentum in areas the Germans had believed secure. Recovery units became frontline enablers, operating under immense stress yet with unflinching focus. They worked in shifts, often exposed to sniper fire, artillery, and the constant threat of counterattack. Yet the efficiency of the system meant that tanks could return to combat faster than German forces could neutralize them. Infantry units advancing alongside the returning Shermans reported renewed vigor. Private Thomas Grady, watching a repaired tank lead the way through the fields, whispered to his comrade, "Look at her go. I thought she was done for yesterday. Yet here she is, like nothing happened." Soldiers began to treat these machines not only as weapons, but as symbols of invincibility. Psychological advantage as potent as their 75mm guns. German troops attempted to adapt. Anti-tank teams coordinated more meticulously, firing in concentrated patterns. Artillery officers recalculated their trajectories and strengthened defensive lines. But the Allies' repair capabilities undercut these efforts. Destroyed tanks did not remain out of action long enough to allow German forces to consolidate their defensive strategy. Each repaired Sherman was a tactical reset, a challenge to enemy assumptions about permanence and attrition. At the front, the human element remained as critical as the mechanical. Recovery crews often ventured into contested zones to secure destroyed tanks. Drivers navigated shell-ravaged terrain. Mechanics welded armor under intermittent fire, and officers coordinated logistics amid the chaos of battle. Each successful operation preserved not only machines but the confidence and morale of troops who relied on them. By late afternoon, a convoy of repaired Shermans rumbled back into the fray. Dust clouds mingled with smoke from ongoing skirmishes. Infantrymen cheered softly as familiar hulks moved past them, and engineers allowed themselves brief nods of satisfaction. To the Germans, it was a disheartening sight. Vehicles thought permanently lost now formed the spearhead of the Allied advance. Strategically, this ability to repair and redeploy tanks rapidly contributed to the eventual breakthrough of German lines in Normandy. By maintaining armored superiority in critical sectors, the Allies forced German units into retreat, disrupted defensive cohesion, and accelerated the liberation of territory. The effectiveness of rapid repair was no longer merely tactical, it had become decisive. At night, depots glowed with the same rhythmic sparks, welding arcs illuminating determined faces, while tanks awaited their next journey back to the battlefield. Each repair reinforced a simple truth. In the Normandy campaign, victory was determined not solely by who could fire the hardest, but by who could endure, rebuild, and return stronger after every setback. The Germans had underestimated the power of recovery. By the time they realized the full scope, it was too late. By October 1944, the Normandy campaign had entered its final stages. The Allies were no longer merely advancing, they were breaking through, leveraging every advantage their logistics, engineering, and recovery systems could provide. Sherman tanks, once seen as expendable instruments of attrition, had become resilient icons of mechanized persistence. They were rebuilt, reinforced, and returned to the fight with astonishing speed, altering both the tactical and psychological landscape. In the fields outside Caen, Lieutenant William Harper guided a convoy of repaired Shermans along narrow lanes carved by artillery and tank tracks. Dust swirled in the evening light, mingling with the faint acrid smell of spent shells. Infantrymen watched as familiar hulks, once thought lost, rumbled past with undiminished force. "They just keep coming back," whispered one soldier, awe mixing with fatigue. The statement encapsulated the quiet terror and admiration the Germans felt in equal measure. German field reports were blunt. Captain Hans Weber recorded, "We calculate destroyed tanks daily, yet the enemy returns units we believed eliminated. Each repaired Sherman emboldens their troops, undermines our morale, and renders our calculations unreliable. Their engineering and logistics are a weapon beyond artillery." At the forward depots, Lieutenant Colonel Penrose oversaw the last wave of repairs for Normandy. The process had become almost automatic. Prefabricated armor plates lined the walls. Engines waited in cradles, road wheels stacked like silent sentinels. Mechanics and welders moved with choreographed precision, replacing turrets, realigning tracks, and checking electrical systems under the steady hum of generators. Each tank was inspected rigorously, ensuring that when it returned to the field, it was ready for immediate action. Corporal Henry Dawkins wiped soot from his face and surveyed a Sherman whose engine had been destroyed in an ambush weeks before. "She roll again," he said, a faint smile breaking through exhaustion. And indeed she would. The tank was stripped, repaired, reinforced, and within hours, ready to rejoin her platoon. Meanwhile, German forces struggled to maintain cohesion. The repeated return of supposedly destroyed Shermans created uncertainty in defensive planning. Every engagement carried the fear that destroyed tanks would reappear, often with crews who had survived or been reassigned, adding an unpredictable layer to battlefield calculations. Even the most disciplined units began hesitating. Their fire controlled but cautious, always mindful that their previous successes were impermanent. The EOs capitalized on this edge. Commanders orchestrated combined arms offensives with a confidence that stemmed not only from numerical superiority but from the certainty that damaged armor could be restored quickly. Tanks that had been wrecked in the hedgerows days earlier now led renewed assaults, maintaining momentum that German units could not halt. The campaign became a relentless push forward as logistics, engineering skill, and human endurance converged into a decisive advantage. By the end of October, the Normandy campaign had achieved a significant breakthrough. German defensive lines crumbled under the weight of coordinated assaults, artillery barrages, and the inexorable return of armored units. Sherman tanks, resurrected from the battlefield, had played a pivotal role. Not simply machines, they had become symbols of Allied ingenuity, resilience, and logistical mastery. For the men of the Royal Army Ordnance Corps and American repair teams, the victory was bittersweet. Exhaustion and casualties had taken a toll, yet the success of their methods underscored the importance of their work. Every rebuilt tank represented a triumph of human skill over destruction, of order imposed upon chaos, and of relentless determination in the face of adversity. For German soldiers, the lesson was harsh and enduring. Mechanical destruction, no matter how complete, was only temporary against an opponent who had mastered the art of rapid repair. By the time they understood the full scope of Allied recovery operations, the battlefield had already shifted decisively. The outcome of Normandy irrevocably altered. As autumn settled over Normandy, the shattered fields slowly quieted, leaving behind a landscape scarred by combat but also marked by human ingenuity. The rapid repair and return of Sherman tanks had become an unspoken force multiplier, a quiet, relentless mechanism that sustained the Allied advance and confounded the Germans at every turn. Soldiers who had once relied on sheer firepower now relied equally on the certainty that damaged machines could be resurrected within days. Lieutenant Colonel Penrose walked among the repaired tanks in the forward depot, observing crews performing final checks. The air smelled of oil, metal, and the faint tang of autumn leaves. Sparks from a welding torch flashed across a nearby hull, illuminating the steady hands of mechanics who had become experts at the art of reconstruction. Penrose paused by a Sherman whose turret bore scars from a direct hit. He touched the steel lightly. "She's done," he said quietly. Back to the line, stronger than before. Across the battlefield, German officers recorded the same observation over and over in their logs. Tanks thought destroyed are returned operational. Enemy morale remains high. Our calculations fail. Their capacity to repair is as formidable as their firepower. The realization was bitter but unavoidable. The Allies' logistical and engineering prowess had become a decisive weapon. For the men in the field, these repaired Shermans were more than machines. They were symbols of endurance. Soldiers riding alongside them felt the reassurance of armored support, knowing that the loss of a vehicle did not equate to permanent vulnerability. Engineers, mechanics, and recovery crews, often overlooked in the grand narrative of battle, had exerted a silent yet immense influence on the campaign's outcome. Their work turned destruction into temporary setback and reshaped the battlefield in ways the Germans could neither predict nor fully counter. In historical hindsight, Normandy stands as a testament to this resilience. The speed and efficiency with which the Allies repaired tanks demonstrated the vital interplay between engineering, logistics, and strategy. Every Sherman that returned to combat challenged the conventional understanding of attrition warfare. It was a lesson in adaptability, foresight, and the unglamorous yet crucial role of men who labored tirelessly behind the lines. Soldiers who witnessed these recoveries often recounted them in memoirs, describing the awe and hope inspired by tanks that refused to remain dead. German reports, meanwhile, reflected frustration and bewilderment, acknowledging that the Allies' mechanical ingenuity had turned the tide of engagements in ways that artillery alone could not undo. The legacy of these operations extends beyond Normandy. Modern military doctrine recognizes the importance of rapid repair, forward maintenance, and recovery units as critical to sustain combat operations. The Shermans of 1944 exemplified a principle that endures. Survival is not determined solely by firepower but by the capacity to adapt, repair, and return to the fight. For the engineers, mechanics, and recovery teams, their victories were quiet but profound. They labored without recognition on the front lines of innovation, transforming wreckage into instruments of victory. Each restored Sherman was a monument to human skill and endurance, a mechanical phoenix rising from the flames of battle. By the end of October, the Normandy campaign had shifted decisively in favor of the Allies. German forces, depleted, demoralized, and outmaneuvered, faced a relentless march that would carry across France in the following months. The rapid repair of Sherman tanks, once merely a logistical necessity, had become a force multiplier, shaping not only the outcome of battles but the very perception of Allied strength. In the annals of World War II, these restored machines stand as silent witnesses to resilience, ingenuity, and the unsung heroes whose work behind the lines ensured that no tank was ever truly lost.